The moment Sylvester Stallone sat down on The View, nobody had the slightest idea that television history was about to be made. In less than 2 minutes, a simple question from Jane Fonda turned into one of the most fiery clashes ever broadcast live. And then, right in front of millions, Stallone unleashed a brutal, filtered response that left Fonda frozen, the host scrambling, and the entire studio gasping in disbelief. This wasn't an argument. This was a total meltdown on live TV. Asterisk, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so ya never miss an update. Now, let's dive into what really happened. Asterisk. The studio fell silent the very moment Sylvester Stallone stepped onto the brightly lit set of The View. It was the kind of silence that doesn't come naturally, not the silence of respect or admiration, but the silence of anticipation, the kind that makes every heartbeat echo just a bit louder. The audience had arrived expecting something simple, a fun, relaxed interview. Maybe some jokes about Stallone's legendary action movie career. Maybe a nostalgic moment about Rocky or Rambo. Or perhaps a few hints about his next big Hollywood project. After all, Stallone had always been known for his charisma, his warm grin, his easygoing energy, his ability to charm a crowd within seconds. But today, something felt different. Before a single word was spoken, you could almost feel the shift in the air. The tension wasn't loud, but it was so real you could practically reach out and touch it. The host, usually relaxed, playful, and smiling, sat unusually upright in their chairs, hands clasped. Eyes fixed on Stallone, as if preparing themselves for a conversation that wasn't going to follow the usual script. And then there was Jane Fonda, sitting directly across from Stallone. She had a look on her face that wasn't hostile, but certainly wasn't friendly either. It was a look of someone who had something to say, something she had possibly been waiting years to say. Her posture was firm, her expression thoughtful, her eyes sharp. People who knew her recognized immediately. She wasn't just waiting for an interview. She was waiting for a moment. Even the producers in the control room sensed it. Screens flickered, headsets buzzed. A few of them exchanged glances, whispering quietly. They didn't know what was coming, but they knew something was. The audience applauded as Stallone approached his seat. But even the applause felt different, shorter than usual, more cautious, as if the crowd themselves sensed the storm building in the distance. Stallone sat down, flashed his iconic smile, and gave a friendly nod to the hosts. But there was something else behind that smile, a hint of awareness, a sense that he, too, felt the tension humming beneath the bright studio lights. Because Stallone wasn't just a guest, he was a seasoned veteran of Hollywood. Someone who had spent decades navigating interviews, controversies, debates, and criticism. And he could feel it immediately. This wasn't going to be a light-hearted conversation. This wasn't going to be the usual promotional chat. This was going to go deep. And this was going to go real. He glanced around subtly. The hosts looked unusually serious. The audience was sitting up straight. Jane Fonda's eyes didn't waver for a second. They were locked onto him, almost studying him, waiting for the exact moment to strike with whatever she'd been holding on to. But the most telling sign came from the silence itself. Television studios are never quiet. There's always something rustling papers, whispered directions from assistants, the hum of lights, the shuffle of feet. But at that moment, everything felt still, unnaturally still, like the breath before an explosion, and Stallone sensed it just as clearly as everyone else. Something was about to happen, something big, something intense. He didn't know the exact words that were coming. He didn't know how heated the discussion would become. But he knew, deep down, that the friendly atmosphere The View usually maintained was about to break. And he was right. This moment, the quiet before the storm, would soon become the opening chapter of one of the most shocking live TV confrontations of the year. The interview began the way thousands of others had started for Sylvester Stallone. The hosts greeted him with warm smiles. The audience cheered loudly. And Stallone responded with the effortless charm that had followed him throughout his legendary career. He cracked a few light jokes about getting older, talked about his disciplined fitness routine, and shared a nostalgic moment about filming the first Rocky movie on a shoestring budget. The crowd loved every second, but underneath that cheerful energy, something was waiting. Something only one person in the room seemed prepared to unleash. As the laughter faded, Jane Fonda slowly leaned forward. She adjusted her glasses not for vision, but with the precision of someone preparing to deliver a carefully aimed question. The room subtly shifted. Even the host sensed it. "Stallone," she began, her voice calm but carrying a hidden blade, "do you ever regret the kind of movies you made? The violence, the messages, the impact they had on society?" The words weren't loud, but they hit like a punch. The audience stirred. A few gasps broke the silence. One of the hosts glanced at another as if silently asking, "Is this really happening right now?" Stallone didn't respond immediately. He raised an eyebrow, a slight expression of surprise, then curiosity. He had been challenged before critics, journalists, talk shows, but something about Jane's tone felt more pointed, more personal. He took a breath and answered with measured calm. "Well," said thoughtfully, "movies reflect the world people live in. Rocky, Rambo. These aren't just action heroes. They're symbols of resilience. They stand for courage, fighting for something bigger than yourself." The audience clapped, relieved that he handled the moment with grace. But Jane Fonda wasn't done. She leaned in again, this time with unmistakable intensity. "Yes, but don't you think Hollywood has a responsibility to show more positive portrayals? Less violence? Especially in this day and age?" Her words cut deeper, and the studio felt it. Even the camera operators paused in their movements. Fully locked onto the tension building on stage, Stallone's expression subtly shifted, not anger, but firmness. A man who had been pushed just enough to bring out a deeper conviction. "Responsibility," he repeated. "Of course, we all have responsibility. But storytelling isn't about pretending the world is safe. It's about showing struggle. It's about people who rise from nothing, because that's real." Another wave of applause rose from the audience. Louder this time, like they were rooting for him in an emotional boxing match. But Jane did not step back. If anything, she stepped in closer, her voice sharper, her posture rigid. "So you don't believe your movies contributed to a culture of aggression?" she asked, her tone now openly confrontational. This was no longer a casual question. This was a challenge. A direct hit aimed at the heart of Stallone's decades-long legacy. The room froze. The hosts held their breath. Even the live audience sensed they were witnessing a moment that would explode online within minutes. Stallone straightened in his seat. His eyes locked onto Fonda's with a calm intensity that said he was done playing polite guest. He was ready to defend himself not as an actor, but as a storyteller. And that's when everything shifted from an interview to a standoff, from a discussion to a confrontation. The firestorm had officially begun. The tension in the studio had already reached a boiling point, but the real explosion came when Stallone finally leaned forward, took a steady breath, and let his voice deepen with resolve. This wasn't the charming movie star anymore. This was a man defending a lifetime of work, a lifetime of passion. "Jane," he began slowly, his tone respectful but unshakably firm. "With all due respect, I've spent my entire life telling stories that connect with real people. My films don't promote aggression. They promote survival. They promote discipline, heart, hope." The audience murmured in agreement. They felt his sincerity. But Jane Fonda wasn't done. She crossed her arms tightly, her eyes narrowed. Hope through violence. She shot back, emphasizing the last word, as if she were throwing a challenge across the table. Stallone didn't flinch. He didn't pause. He didn't even blink. "Hope through struggle," he corrected, his voice growing even stronger. People misunderstood Rambo because they never looked at the character's pain. They only saw explosions. But millions of veterans, millions told me that Rambo made them feel seen when the world ignored them. A heavy silence fell. That line didn't just hit. Hard, it landed like a punch to the gut. The audience erupted into loud applause, some even rising from their seats. The hosts exchanged stunned glances, clearly not expecting the conversation to reach such emotional depth. But if anyone thought this moment would soften Jane Fonda, they were wrong. She leaned in, refusing to let the momentum slip from her grasp. "Well," she said sharply, "I still believe Hollywood needs more accountability. And actors, especially those with your influence, need to reflect on the messages they deliver." The tension skyrocketed. The air felt electric. Everyone knew Stallone wouldn't let that pass, and he didn't, because the moment that followed the next words that left Stallone's mouth became the line that would go viral across every social platform within hours. Stallone locked eyes with Jane Fonda, his expression serious, almost unblinking. Accountability. He repeated slowly, letting the word hang in the air. "Jane, Hollywood shouldn't hide reality, and neither should its critics. Stories aren't dangerous." He paused. The entire room leaned closer, waiting. "Silence is dangerous," he continued, his voice echoing through the studio. "Pretending people don't struggle is dangerous. I'd rather show the fight than pretend it's not happening." Boom. Those words hit the studio like a shockwave. The room exploded into cheers. Loud, raw, emotional. A couple of audience members even whistled. The hosts looked completely thrown off, one of them covering her mouth in disbelief. Even Jane Fonda, usually composed and articulate, blinked just once, long enough for the cameras to catch it. Her expression faltered. For the first time since the confrontation began, she didn't have an immediate comeback. She seemed briefly stunned, as if Stallone had struck a nerve she wasn't ready to expose. Stallone didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He simply sat back, calm but powerful. As the audience's cheers continued, behind the cameras the producers scrambled, some whispering anxiously, others signaling to keep the cameras rolling no matter what. They knew they were capturing television gold, a moment that would replay on social media millions of times. The applause lasted longer than expected, filling the studio with a thunderous roar. Fonda inhaled deeply, regaining her posture. But the shift in energy was undeniable. Stallone had taken control of the conversation, and everyone on set and watching at home knew. The interview had officially crossed the line from a heated discussion to a full-blown, unforgettable showdown. Asterisk. What happened next shocked not just the audience, but even the seasoned hosts of The View, people who thought they'd seen every kind of on-air drama imaginable. Yet none of them expected the sudden shift that was about to unfold after Stallone's powerful words echoed through the studio. Jane Fonda opened her mouth as if preparing to fire back. Everyone braced themselves. Another verbal clash seemed inevitable. The audience waited for the next spark. The producers leaned forward in their booths, fingers hovering over their controls. Even Stallone seemed ready, sitting upright, its expression steady and composed. But instead of unleashing another sharp critique, Fonda did something completely unexpected. Her shoulders relaxed, her tone softened, and for the first time since the interview began, she looked not confrontational, but genuinely contemplative. "I understand your point," she said quietly, surprising even herself. "But sometimes, your films overshadow the message they try to deliver." Her voice wasn't sharp anymore. It wasn't accusatory. It carried something else, something almost vulnerable. It was as if Stallone's words had struck a place she didn't anticipate. Forcing her to reconsider her approach, the studio grew silent again, but not with tension this time. This silence was thoughtful. Stallone nodded respectfully, not taking the bait for another clash. "And sometimes," he replied gently, "people judge movies without understanding why they resonate in the first place." He leaned forward, speaking not as a star defending his work, but as a storyteller revealing his heart. Every kid who watched Rocky didn't suddenly want to become a boxer. They wanted to believe they could rise again. They wanted to believe they could stand up, no matter how many times life knocked them down. This time the applause was different, longer, louder, filled with emotion rather than excitement. People weren't clapping for drama now. They were clapping because they understood the meaning behind his words. Even the hosts looked moved. The tension that had hung in the air like a storm cloud finally began to dissolve. Stallone continued, his voice steady but full of conviction. Movies don't shape destiny. They inspire it. And I will never apologize for trying to give people something to believe in. That line was more than a response. It was a statement of identity of who he was as an artist, as a creator. As a man who spent decades building stories from sweat, pain, and hope, Fonda inhaled slowly, almost as if absorbing the weight of everything he had just said. For the first time in the entire interview, she didn't seem ready to challenge him. She didn't seem ready to debate or argue or push back. Instead, she looked at Stallone with a mixture of respect and surprise. "You're more thoughtful about this than I expected," she admitted sincerely. The honesty in her voice took the studio by surprise. Even Stallone seemed slightly taken aback, but only for a moment. He smiled, genuine. Warm, slightly amused. "People don't give me enough credit," he joked lightly. The audience burst into laughter. Even Jane Fonda couldn't help but smile, shaking her head at his perfectly timed humor. The storm had passed. The heat had faded. And what remained was something rare to icons, seeing each other not as opponents, but as humans trying to understand one another. The tension that had electrified the room finally broke into calm. A bridge had been built, expected but sincere. But by that point, it didn't matter. The viral moment had already been born. The exchange, the clash, the passion, the sudden honesty had already carved its place across the internet. Clips were being prepared. Tweets were being drafted. Reactions were already forming. The world had just witnessed one of the most unforgettable TV moments of the year, and the story wasn't over yet. The segment ended with polite smiles, the kind you often see after a tense interview, but the calm on camera was deceiving. Behind the cameras, the energy was anything but polite. Producers, assistants, and crew members were still buzzing, exchanging stunned glances, knowing that what had just unfolded was unlike anything they had ever witnessed. As soon as the show cut to commercial, clips of the confrontation began to spread like wildfire. Within minutes, the internet was ablaze. On Twitter, short clips of Stallone defending his work against Jane Fonda's pointed questions went viral, racking up thousands of retweets and comments in real time. On Instagram, fans debated the exchange in the Stories and Reels section, analyzing every glance, every pause, and every carefully chosen word. YouTube viewers began uploading highlight clips, some with dramatic music added for effect. The hashtag Stallone vs Fonda was trending in multiple countries by the end of the hour. Fans of Stallone flooded social media, praising him for standing his ground. Comments ranged from admiration for his eloquence to excitement over the emotional weight behind his words. Finally, someone defending real storytelling? One user wrote, "That was raw, honest, and powerful," said another. Meanwhile, supporters of Jane Fonda applauded her for raising difficult, important questions about Hollywood's responsibility. Some called her brave for challenging an icon so publicly. Amid all this, there was one point on which everyone seemed to agree. This was not just an ordinary interview. It was one of the most intense, unpredictable, and unforgettable moments ever seen on The View. It had drama, heart, and authenticity, the perfect storm for modern media virality. Back in the studio, the tension had lifted, replaced with a quiet sense of accomplishment. Stallone left first, calm, collected, and smiling. He waved to the audience, exuding the kind of effortless confidence that comes from knowing you have stayed true to yourself under pressure. Fonda followed, walking out with her head held high, composed and dignified even as cameras continued to capture every step. Two Hollywood legends, two strong personalities, one explosive, unforgettable moment. And while the audience in the studio would carry the memory with them for weeks, the real impact was unfolding online, across phones, tablets, and computers worldwide. Memes, reaction videos, and opinion threads erupted everywhere. Even late-night talk shows couldn't resist commenting, replaying Stallone's impassioned defense and Fonda's sharp questions for comedic or analytical effect as the day turned. And tonight, one thing became crystal clear. Sometimes, the most powerful moments on live television aren't scripted. They're real, raw, and impossible to ignore. There was no teleprompter for honesty, no rehearsed lines to soften the impact. It's just a clash of ideas, conviction, and courage unfolding in front of millions, and for viewers everywhere. The lesson was simple. Television can still surprise you. It can still evoke emotion, debate, and discussion, even in a world dominated by polished, controlled media. The exchange between Stallone and Fonda had done more than entertain it, had reminded people of the power of live interaction, of genuine disagreement, and of speaking your truth. By the next morning, the segment had dominated headlines. Social media analysts, entertainment reporters, fans alike dissected the moment from every angle, ensuring that what had happened on that stage would not fade quickly from public memory. The impact of Stallone's words, the honesty of Fonda's challenge, and the genuine reactions from everyone in the room combined to create a television moment that would be replayed, discussed, and remembered for years to come.